Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. We've got you covered. Traditional leagues, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Marcus Vargas, and first and foremost, I want to say that I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you're safe. I hope you're happy. I hope you're sane. I hope you have toilet paper, and I hope just that you guys are okay. All right. Let's get right into the show today, guys. Today I'm starting off talking about receivers because last week, excuse my finger cracking, excuse me, last week I did mention that I was going to talk about wide receivers, but I'm not going to talk about their playoff matchups just because, to me, I felt like I was going to be very redundant because, a lot of the receivers I was going to talk about belong to teams where I had already talked about their quarterbacks. So, basically, all the quarterbacks I mentioned last week, the wide receivers kind of correlate there, right? Because clearly a bad passing defense, receiver and quarterback are going to benefit. And I did a column for running backs because the rush defense clearly is different from the pass defense. One can be very good for a team and very bad in the same defense. So, aka the Chiefs. So, I am going to talk about receivers today. But what I'm going to do is talk about some young receivers that I think, not that they're going overlooked, but people aren't paying enough attention to. And I want to bring some attention to them. So that's what I'm going to be doing. Talking about some young guys I think you should keep on your radar for the fantasy football draft, because I think there is some significant value here on where they're being drafted on average and where you can get them. Okay. The first receiver I do want to start with is DJ Moore of the Carolina Panthers. Now, I understand last season, he was a solid fantasy football receiver, not, someone we regard as elite, 1,175 yards, 4 touchdowns, and that's probably the reason why, and 87 receptions. Not bad at all, but not amazing. Now, he only has had 6 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons, which clearly is not very good, but I do want to remind you guys, that team has Christian McCaffrey, and that team has not had a solid quarterback in quite some time. Even when Cam Newton was there 2 years ago, he was struggling with injury, really wasn't himself. And, of course, I think that was DJ Moore's rookie year. We don't expect too much from rookies, no matter how good they were in college, right? You can't just expect them to come in and replicate those stats. So I think this is going to be a very telling year. And I think DJ Moore is going to break out, and I think he's going to, right now he's being drafted as the wide receiver 10 on ESPN Live Draft Trends. He's on average being taken, I think off the top of my head it was pick 32 or something like that, at the start of the 4th round, which I think is good value for him to get a wide receiver 1. You're getting a wide receiver 1 in the 4th round, so definitely like that. I think he has potential to sort of move up a couple spots and perform as, wide receiver 7, 8, and I think that's very, very good value for, a 4th round guy, young guy. And I want to remind everyone, yes, his quarterback is Teddy Bridgewater. We know he's not going to throw any bombs or anything that are constantly, not going to go Patrick Mahomes, but he did help Michael Thomas post, some very, very good fantasy football games, over that 6 or 5 week stretch. And I think, off the top of my head, Michael Thomas's, the most yards he had in a game this season were with Teddy Bridgewater quarterback, not Drew Brees, which is very, very interesting. So keep your eyes on DJ Moore, guys. Definitely someone that you should be paying attention to. Now, this next guy, yes, he's in the AFC West. Yes, he's a rival, but, I'm going to, give him the respect he deserves. I know I have talked a bit about him, that I'm sort of iffy on him. So, but take that with a grain of salt because most of those criticisms come because of who his quarterback is. This guy I want to talk about now is Courtland Sutton. Now, last year he posted just over 1,100 yards, 6 TDs on 72 receptions. Very interesting stat here. Courtland Sutton is the only wide receiver to rank in the top 7 for broken tackles. Very, very interesting. He's also 8th in plays over 20 yards. I think Courtland Sutton has a lot of potential to shine. He's a lot of potential to be a star. We just are going to have to see what happens with Drew Lock. I think, that's the thing that's clearly, it's what has me iffy. And if Drew Lock turns out to be a stud or even just a little bit above average, Courtland Sutton is definitely going to outperform his ADP right now, wide receiver 15. So definitely keep your eyes on Courtland Sutton because you're getting him in the 5th round, and he has potential to outperform some guys, that people are taking earlier, like Amari Cooper, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Allen Robinson. So Courtland Sutton is a guy definitely could take advantage. Also, he's not in the strongest division. You do, have to remember that. While, the Chargers game is definitely going to be rough. The Raiders and Chiefs, they're not. Yes, the Chiefs were solid against the pass towards the second half of the season. Actually, drastically improved. There's not any, I wouldn't say there's a lockdown corner on that team, right? So of course, Honey Badger is going to be great. They're definitely, if they use him at corner, he's definitely going to be all over him. But there are several weaknesses on the defense that he and the Broncos can take advantage of. So Courtland Sutton, the next guy you guys should definitely be paying attention to. Now, this next one, very, very important here because I think he's going to shock a lot of people. Actually, I wouldn't say it's a shock because I think a lot of people are expecting this, but I think he's going to boom onto the scene more than he already has. Calvin Ridley of the Atlanta Falcons. I've already spoken about him as a breakout candidate for next season just because I think, Julio Jones is getting older. I think Julio is 31 off the top of my head, and Calvin Ridley, I don't know if you guys remember 2 years ago, he had like 1 trillion touchdowns to open up the season, and people were like, holy moly. I think he had 3 touchdowns in that one game in Atlanta, and I think they were home. I feel like I remember them being in a dome and him just lighting it up, and me being sad that I didn't have him. So definitely pay attention to Calvin Ridley. In total, in his first 2 seasons in the NFL, 17 touchdowns. That's pretty insane. So and another interesting stat, he is no less than 821 yards each of his first 2 seasons. Last year he finished with 866 yards and 7 TDs. That's because he missed games due to injury, so don't let those numbers really fool you here. I think in his 3rd year, he's going to make a big leap that people aren't necessarily ready for, and, people in your live drafts, they aren't really paying attention to. Right now, Calvin Ridley is being drafted as wide receiver 20. I think that's incredibly low for the value. I mean, for the potential he has here. He was rostered in 95% of leagues last season. Yes, he ranked as wide receiver 27, but remember, he missed several games. He missed 3 games to end the season last season. I want to, give you the numbers on the 4 games right before he got hurt. 18.6 points, 17.1, 22.0, 28.3. Do you like that? Because I like that. For sure. Yes, he had some pretty bad games, 7.7, 7.0, 6.2, and 1.6, but those were the only games where he scored under 14 points. 14.8 points was his lowest total besides those 4 games. So, definitely a solid guy, and I think he's going to slowly become, more and more take that, that Juju role from Antonio Brown, where you saw Antonio Brown have a very good season, but Juju Smith-Schuster also have a great season. Definitely pay attention. If you pay attention to anyone on this list, I think Calvin Ridley would be sort of that sleeper kind of guy where he could be a steal of the draft next season for sure. Also, just to remind you guys, he is in a very prolific, pass heavy offense. While they don't they don't win too many games, or they haven't since the Super Bowl slump. They did go back to the playoffs. I'll give them that credit, but they haven't been the same since. They are sort of a high-flying offense. I know Matt Ryan doesn't get the credit he deserves, but he is a very, very good quarterback. We have to remember that he's put up his MVP year numbers. He's put up after that MVP season where they lost in the Super Bowl, but he's just not getting the recognition. I don't know why. Man, even Madden didn't give him the recognition and didn't give him an X Factor ability. So, definitely believe in Matty Ice, believe in that offense, because they're a prolific passing offense, and Calvin Ridley is definitely going to shine next season. It's sort of feeling more like he's becoming a 1B receiver to Julio 1A, and not necessarily a wide receiver 2. If he can stay healthy, he's going to make a huge leap next season, and you want to be the guy, who said, I told you so, and you took advantage of that. But alright, we're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we'll continue to talk about more wide receivers, possibly move into the next topic after that. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after this short break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Young receivers you guys should definitely be keeping your eye on. We finished with perhaps the most important of the list, but now we're just going to continue. And this is this next one I want to talk about is one who also could be, as important or as valuable as Calvin Ridley next season. It's a very popular receiver, I think, at least. DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks. Now, DK showed the entire world what he could do, when he played the Eagles in the playoffs last season. He's a freak of nature. Of course, after the combine, there was that talk that, in all the receiver drills he sucked, and yes, he's super hyper athletic and jump, and he's super, super fast for his size. He sucks basically at the technical things, the route running, the agility, the side to side, you know what I mean? That kind of stuff. The fundamental mechanics of being a receiver. And yes, okay, he might have some struggles with the mechanics, but he had 900 yards last season, 7 touchdowns on 58 receptions. I like that. Also, I think he's slowly going to become more and more Russell Wilson's favorite target. Russell Wilson is a very solid quarterback, so if you're that guy's favorite target, you're going to put up big numbers in fantasy football. Now, there have been talks of Seattle of expanding his route tree, so he could become more of a complete receiver. If that happens, he's going to become the number one receiver in Seattle, and he's going to get more red zone targets, and he's going to get more touchdowns. Last year, he was actually in the top 15 in red zone targets. So, do you like that stat? If you at least go wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 for all teams, that is 64 receivers. So out of those 64, the top wide receiver 1 and 2 in teams, he's 14th in red zone targets. I would definitely take that. He had 17 targets in the red zone on only 58 catches. I don't have his actual target number, the total target number, but that's pretty good if you ask me. So I only think these numbers are going to improve. First of all, crazy athlete, freak of nature, definitely a guy who's going to be a household name in the league very, very soon. I think, you have to look past, okay, yes, I think we should be looking, when we say, he's a freak of nature, I don't think we should be looking at, what he struggles at. We should just be talking about the fact that he's a freak of nature, right? And that should be scary. And it is scary for a lot of teams. So keep your eye on DK Metcalf. I think he has for sure a ton of potential, and some of the most potential out of most receivers on this list here, because right now he's getting drafted as wide receiver 29, behind guys like Stephon Diggs, behind guys like Jarvis Landry. And I think, if DK sort of emerges competing for that number 1 spot, he can for sure put up more numbers than a guy like Jarvis Landry, than even a guy like Robert Woods, who's going way, way before DK Metcalf at wide receiver 19. So keep your eyes on DK Metcalf. He could be a shocker for sure. Okay, now we move on to another very, very interesting one, because he sort of broke out. Terry McLaurin of the Washington Redskins, 919 yards and 7 TDs on 58 receptions, just like DK Metcalf. Basically had the same stats as DK Metcalf. Now, he was playing with a much, much, much worse quarterback. So that's pretty insane. Did the Redskins get any receiving threats? Did they have anyone where, they're going to compete for the number 1 spot? I don't think so. Terry McLaurin is a beast. His numbers aren't as high as other guys. First of all, 7 touchdowns, so that's more than DJ Moore, another guy on this list. And, of course, the yards aren't there, but he had Dwayne Haskins throwing to him and Case Keenum for the beginning there. Case Keenum wasn't horrible in the beginning. But, nothing too crazy, nothing too special, right? Dwayne Haskins has not shown that he, is necessarily ready for the NFL. Makes a lot of mistakes. But still, Terry McLaurin shined. And I think you should definitely be paying attention to him. A lot of people, they like to leave receivers that are on bad teams, understandably so, get left astray. Last year he ranked as 29, but he had several very, very good games, like 23 points, 17 points, 19 points, 26 points, 15, 24, and 15. Now, I understand it's way more games than that. He didn't play Week 17 in Dallas. He didn't play Week 4 against the Giants. He had several stinkers, but it's so much less about him, and it's so much more about his quarterbacks. I think he's a guy, he's going to suffer because the quarterback play is very shoddy. But in his second year, he's only going to get better, and I think he can be very, very good. Just so you guys know, he didn't rank that far behind Odell Beckham Jr. last season. I think Terry McLaurin had somewhere around 190 total points last year in fantasy football, 191, and Odell had about 201. So he only scored 10 points less than Odell Beckham Jr., and he had are we really going to say that? Okay, Baker wasn't the best last season, but would you have Baker over Case Keenum? I think so. Now, let's move on to the next receiver, because this is one I think is very, very interesting and could end up shocking a lot of people. I want to talk about Will Fuller of the Houston Texans. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Will Fuller, I think he's going to be the number 1. He definitely has potential to do so, but is this going to be like a clear-cut Will Fuller show? No. Right? Brandon Cooks is also on that team. But, Will Fuller had some pretty crazy games, and I understand he's very, very inconsistent. But with that top-end speed, I think, and with the chemistry he has with Deshaun Watson, I think he becomes the wide receiver 1, and there's so many targets left on this offense by, we all know what happened. DeAndre Hopkins leaving. I think if he can stay healthy, now here's the problem. This is the one I'm going to put an asterisk on this one, because Will Fuller cannot stay healthy. If he can, he's going to be very, very valuable, because I think a lot of people are staying away from him, and rightfully so, like I understand. But check this. Excuse me. He's being drafted as ESPN's wide receiver 35. He's being picked at pick 99. Now, I think that's an interesting, spot to take a gamble. A gamble on a guy who could, perform several spots better than that. I don't think he's going to finish next year as wide receiver 35 at all. Behind DeAndre Hopkins and, dealing with nagging injuries, he finished as 53. I think he can do way, way, way better than that. Now, this is only one game, and you don't want to base everything and your, how you draft people off of one game. But this man had a 53-point fantasy football game. Not many receivers can say that. That sort of potential, and he also had a 21-point game in Indy. The rest were pretty average or abysmal, but he missed, I think it was 4 or 5 games last season, so he was never really healthy after that. He didn't really perform well after that, and that's when he had some of his lower totals of the season. But my goodness, he has 53-point potential. Yes, it's kind of fluky, but I think with his speed and the opportunity presented to him, by the DeAndre Hopkins trade, I think this is a guy who could be very interesting. Now, this is a guy, like I said, asterisk, has to stay healthy, but one that I think is very, very interesting. So just keep your eye out on him. Now, I want to talk about a guy who, he didn't perform well last season, but it wasn't necessarily his fault. I think, let me just get right into it. Juju Smith-Schuster. Let me stop beating around the bush here. Yes, he didn't perform that well last season, but he didn't have a quarterback. 42 receptions, 552 yards, and only 3 touchdowns. The year prior, the man had 1,426 yards on 111 catches and 7 TDs. He was a stud. He was great. We loved him in fantasy football as well. Didn't love him so much last year. But I will say he is going to bounce back. I think without a doubt he's going to bounce back. Even if Big Ben doesn't come back, he doesn't become, he doesn't return to that 5,000-yard form. Big Ben is much better than Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph. Almost forgot his name. Juju right now is being drafted as wide receiver 12. Right outside of the 4th round, just like DJ Moore. I think he can definitely perform better than Amari Cooper and DJ Moore, even. I know I gave DJ Moore a lot of hype, but Juju on a powerful offense with a, Hall of Fame sort of quarterback. Not sort of, sorry, I don't even know why I said that. But he's the number one guy, and that's obvious. Yes, there's other young receivers on there with potential, but Juju is the number one guy in Pittsburgh. He's going to be great. I think a lot of people need to keep their eyes on him because if you're making the decision, between him and a guy like DJ Moore, like Amari Cooper, I think I'm taking Juju there, right? So take advantage. People are taking even Adam Thielen, DJ Moore, Amari Cooper. They're going before Juju, and I like Juju a little bit more than all of them. I'm not going to say, he's blowing them out of the water, but I certainly like him more than Adam Thielen right now. I understand, Thielen's on the team where he's the clear-cut number one, doesn't have much, competition for targets. He is coming off, a injury-riddled season where he missed a ton of games. He's also in a run-heavy offense, and he's only getting older. So I don't know about Thielen being in the top 10 here. I think it's very interesting, but keep your eyes on Juju Smith-Schuster. All right. Now with that, guys, let's take a short break because, we are running out of time here. Let's take a short break, and when we get back, we'll continue the list and wrap it up. Yeah, it's actually taking longer than I thought. I'm just so passionate about these receivers. I go on rants about them. All right. We'll be right back after the short break, guys. Stay tuned.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Gotta love that one. All right. Let's get right back into it. Right back into the list. There's a couple more receivers I want to go over here because there's a couple guys, I think have very significant value and are a bit overlooked. Okay, this next receiver I want to talk about, another young guy, got into a beef with Michael Thomas. I think he was right in that situation, by the way. If you wanted to know my opinion, if you didn't, well, you have it anyway. Devontae Parker, Miami Dolphins. If you can post 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns and be on that Miami Dolphins offense last season, I want to draft you. I want you on my fantasy football team. Right now, Devontae Parker is being taken as wide receiver 28. This is a guy who ranked as wide receiver 11 last season. Put some respect on this man's name. I think it's pretty crazy that last season, with Ryan Fitzpatrick, the Dolphins being an absolute mess, him ranking 11th, for him to be being drafted so low as wide receiver 28, it's pretty insane. This is going to be, you're going to have a ton of value with this pick. And I think it's very, very important that you keep your eyes on Devontae Parker. He was the first wide receiver to post 100 yards on the Buffalo Bills last season. And that was after 10 weeks straight of the Buffalo Bills not allowing a 100-yard receiver. Now, I understand. Could it be a fluke? No, I don't understand that thought process, actually, because, he's just a solid receiver. He did it all season. 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns on 72 catches. What more do you want? He's on a horrible team. He's a very good overall wide receiver. He's well-rounded. It's like I'm just going to keep repeating I'm a broken record here. He was on the Miami Dolphins. Ryan Fitzpatrick was his quarterback. And I don't care, Fitzmagic, what have you, whatever. Ryan Fitzpatrick is very, very inconsistent. None of the quarterbacks on that team besides, right now, Tua are guys that I want to run with, for the near future. And if Tua becomes a starter, and if Tua's healthy, and if Tua plays how he played in college, please forget about it. Devontae Parker again is going to be 11 or higher, in the fantasy football rankings, and someone's going to get him as wide receiver 28, picked in such a late round. And they're going to be smiling, laughing at people, and winning their league. Right now, he's going on average with pick 70. So if you can get Devontae Parker there, he's being picked along with DK Metcalf that late. So these are guys with significant value, guys. I don't understand, a lot of people's thought process behind taking a secondary wide receiver like Jarvis Landry. No, he's not. I get it, he's not secondary, but he's one of 2 heavily targeted receivers on the team over a guy who is a clear number 1 on the team, clear favorite for the target share. Devontae Parker being taken several picks after him. So keep your eyes on Devontae Parker. There's not much more to say. He's a great receiver who can shine on a very, very bad team. He showed it already. Whatever you think about Michael Thomas's comments, the kid's got talent, and he's shown it time and time again. All right, now this next receiver I do want to talk about is not a young one. Definitely getting older, and that's actually part of the issue. But I think he's worth mentioning. He's a guy that I think you should definitely pay attention to, monitor. AJ Green of the Cincinnati Bengals. I just gave a quick little moment of silence for anyone who had AJ Green last season. I had him for quite a while. And I eventually had to give up on him because of the numerous times where I was actually furious looking at the injury report and seeing he was out or he was questionable all week and didn't play, and it was just sickening. Because I honestly believed that AJ Green would come back next season after missing most of the season prior. I actually can't believe, he hasn't played in so long because he is such a good receiver. It actually sucks, that he's suffered so much and has to deal with all those injuries. But I think, he was once elite. He was once a guy who could put up huge numbers. He was in discussion, one of the top receivers in the NFL. And I think he's insanely talented because he was doing those sorts of things, with not the best quarterback. I'm not saying Andy Dalton is a bum by any means, but Andy Dalton is Andy Dalton. He's a backup. right now, right? So you do have to keep that in mind. AJ Green, though, check this. Wide receiver 30. So a lot of people are believing in him. Guys like Will Fuller and Marquise Brown are going after AJ Green. I think a lot of this has to do with people's belief in Joe Burrow. So, if he's healthy, he can definitely be a top 15 wide receiver next season. I think, his game is definitely going to be rusty. He's going to be slowed down a ton. If he can return to AJ Green form, though, top 10 wide receiver. Top 10 wide receiver being picked as wide receiver 30 in the fantasy drafts. You're going to get ridiculous amounts of value for him. It's going to be absolutely a steal. So, keep your eyes on AJ Green, of course. If injuries are still an issue, he's going to break hearts. Once again, he broke mine last season. But I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and say that that's going to stop me from drafting him again. If I can get him super late, if I'm getting him in round 7, round 8, and he's still there and people don't want him because of the injury history, and Joe Burrow becomes, he had that ridiculous season at LSU, and he becomes, it translates in the NFL, and he performs at that number 1 overall pick level. Guys, you gotta like that. So hopefully AJ Green is a favorite target of his, because he will put up huge numbers. Okay. Last receiver I want to talk about here, one that's very interesting, a young guy. I'm not cheating and throwing any old vets, any injured vets in there anymore. Deebo Samuel. Now, Deebo Samuel only had 3 touchdowns last season. He had 802 yards on 57 catches. But Emmanuel Sanders is gone. And I'm actually blanking on the rookie that they drafted. But I know he's a burner. I'm blanking on his name. Forgive me. But Deebo Samuel right now is a top guy in San Fran at the wide receiver position. Dante Pettis didn't really shape up to be anything great. And Deebo Samuel, if you watched him the second half of last season, he was an absolute stud. And even in the Super Bowl, he was putting in work on my Kansas City Chiefs, and I was growing a bit concerned. But if you look at the second half of his season, he started off pretty poorly, and that's why a lot of people strayed away from him. He did have a 20-point game week 2, but that was against Cincy. People thought it was fluky. Right after that, he gets 7. Right after that, he gets 1. Right after that, he gets 4. So, right, that kind of makes sense. But if we look at his performances after the bye week, week 7, 13.8 against Carolina. He had 8 points against Arizona, 19.2 against Seattle, 21.4 against Arizona, 13 against Green Bay, 14 against that Baltimore defense, 15.9 against New Orleans, 4 against Atlanta, which sucked, but 15.9 against the Rams, 24.5 against the Seattle Seahawks to finish off the season. And then you saw what he was doing in the Super Bowl. It seemed like every time he touched the ball, he was getting 20 yards and could not be tackled. He's going to step up. He's going to break out next season. I think he's going to become the top guy. First of all, with a name like Deebo Samuel, he just even sounds like a savage. That just makes me want to draft him right then and there. Also, I have expressed, my concerns about the 49ers and Jimmy Garoppolo, but they also involve him in a run game. He had 3 rushing touchdowns in 2019. So, he had 6 total touchdowns, you could say. A lot of these wide receivers I'm talking about with 6 or 7 touchdowns, all receiving, didn't have, touchdowns on the ground. He's adding to that total with the rushing, usage, and he gets yards on the ground too. He popped off like a 20-some yarder against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So, Deebo Samuel, definitely a guy you want to pay attention to right now. Forgive me, I actually don't remember off the top of my head. 26th. Wide receiver 26. That's what he's being drafted as. I think he certainly has potential to outperform that. Last season he ranked as 31, but remember, the second half of the last season, he was going off. He was performing like a wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2. You know what I mean? So, definitely keep your eye on Deebo Samuel. Again, they're just guys that I would just, I like to pick, I know not everybody drafts this way, but I draft, potential scoring, potential for, being a wide receiver 1 is what I like to draft with in mind too. So, keep your eyes on Deebo Samuel, guys. I think he's going to reward a lot of fantasy owners. Alright, guys, with that, let's go into our break. And when we get back, more fantasy football.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We move on. Right now, I want to get into some talk about running backs, and I kind of want to do the same thing that I did with the wide receivers. Kind of talk about some guys that I think you guys should definitely be paying attention to, some guys who I think could be of huge value, basically some sort of steals of the draft. Basically the same thing I just did for the wide receivers, but moving on with running back. Okay. The first running back I want to talk about, guys, is a guy in New England, a guy who a lot of people thought had a horrible year last season, Sony Michel. And the reason why I want to talk about him is because people basically aren't even drafting him. He's being drafted on average with the 118th pick in fantasy football drafts as running back 40. He is behind guys, like Keyshawn Vaughn, like Cam Akers, Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift. I get those for, certain reasons, but the point is, these guys haven't even seen the field yet. He's also behind guys like Darius Geis, who cannot stay on the field. Guys like Darrell Henderson Jr., who haven't even been proven. Now, why do I tell you to keep your eye on him? Well, the main reason is because I believe that a lot of people are going to stray away from New England's running backs and their offense in general. I think that a lot of people are going to be down on New England because, Brady's gone. They're not going to do anything. And I'm one of those people, guys. I'm one of those people who has believed that New England's offense is going down the drain. So I think Sony Michel could be a very good steal. Now, last season, in his, down year, he had 912 yards and 7 touchdowns. Not too shabby. Excuse me. And, say Jarrett Stidham goes out there, they run it with Jarrett Stidham and he's pretty awful. They're going to be running the ball a ton. So I think, what you want to do in these drafts, let, who you're drafting with. Hey, if you're drafting in a city where the Patriots are hated, which is basically every other, state besides Massachusetts, take advantage of that, guys. Take advantage of the fact that people aren't going to be drafting, Patriot players. One, because they hate them, and two, because their offense is probably not going to be very good next season. Take advantage of that. If you can get Sony Michel with the 120th pick, I think that's huge value, and I think he has potential to carve out a bigger role. James White's only getting older, and I think they're going to shift their offense a bit. They're not going to, it's not Tom Brady. Can't do the same things Tom Brady was doing. When you don't have Tom Brady, right? So their offense is going to shift, and if he can provide some solid ground game like we've seen him do in the past, he can take the workload off of Jarrett Stidham, which I know they're definitely going to like, right? So keep your eyes on Sony Michel, because I think this could be a huge value pick. He's getting picked so late in drafts, it's not even funny. Okay. Next, running back. This one, he's not, it's not a young guy. It's not a guy, we don't know about. He's younger, but Todd Gurley, right? Obviously not, rookie young or anything like that. He's a younger guy. No surprise, but a lot of people are down on him, right? They know the injury history. The Rams just let him, go to the Falcons. not by a trade. They cut him, and I understand the concern here. Right now, he's being drafted though higher than usual at RB14, and I wanted to put that out there because a lot of people are sort of catching on that Todd Gurley might be a steal. He could be a steal of the draft. They don't have really much RB competition in Atlanta. So Todd Gurley becomes a top guy, and if he's getting passing down work, and if he can stay healthy and become that Todd Gurley you saw in LA, RB14, picking him with number 30 pick in the overall draft, you are the number 30 overall pick, you're going to be sitting pretty if Todd Gurley can produce at that pick there. He's going ahead of guys like Miles Sanders and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, which is a little bit iffy for me because I think, those two guys have a lot of potential without the health concerns. But I like this pick here, RB14 with pick 30 in the draft. That's really solid to me. There's not much else to say because Todd Gurley, has proved himself. We know about Todd Gurley, right? Of course, last season, he didn't have the season he had in 2018, but he still had 12 touchdowns. Right, so he's still a touchdown factor, a huge threat, and I think, the Atlanta Falcons are gonna want to give him the ball. They're gonna want to put, not just keep passing the ball over and over again. They didn't really have a running back, and now they got a guy who's very solid. Devontae Freeman was solid, but he fell off and never really got back to that form. Todd Gurley, though, big potential, super risky, but pay attention. If he slips to the third round like he is here, in the average draft trends, you should definitely take him at that point. I think that's very, very good value for his potential. Now you might be, you're taking a risk here, and you're gonna have to take him earlier than you're taking, a lot of these other guys that I'm going to be talking about. But I think, in the third round for his ceiling, I think that's well worth that pick. Now, another interesting selection is one that I haven't really talked about, and it's honestly, a lot of these people that I'm talking about here are part of committees, but the reason why I want to talk about them is because, they might end up edging out the other person. And the reason why I want to do that, and also because running backs get hurt all the time. So you want running back backups or handcuffs that could produce a lot, and Philip Lindsay is one who I think could put up huge numbers. Now, we already know, what Philip Lindsay can do. Last season, wasn't as good as his first season. I think he dealt with, off the top of my head, if I can remember, Philip Lindsay definitely dealt with injuries 2 seasons ago. I'm pretty sure he dealt with injuries last season too. I don't think he missed any games, but I'm sure he wasn't 100%. He ranked as fantasy football's number 19 running back, and what was sort of a dip year for him, but I think in the committee he can definitely perform, and he's had 2 back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. He has a 4.9 career yards per carry number. Now he does struggle, with the yards after contact. He's not a bulldozer kind of guy, but I think the 1-2 punch of Melvin Gordon, which is what they're going to use him as, could prove productive for him. He's not on the field as much, doesn't fatigue as much, and if Gordon gets hurt, he's back in his starting role, so you take him for the value that you would have taken him if he was a starter. Right, so Philip Lindsay is definitely one to keep your eye on. A lot of people are taking Melvin Gordon way before him. They believe Melvin Gordon will be the starter, or at least the RB1 kind of guy. I don't necessarily agree with that, but it is what it is. Okay. With that, though, we're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we'll jump right back into it, continue this list with running backs, and go on from there. Same thing as we did with the wide receivers. So, we'll be right back, guys. Stay tuned and enjoy the break.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Let's just keep the show going. Let's keep it rolling. We know where we left off talking about running backs. Let's just get right back into it. Another very interesting running back I want to talk about that honestly could go unnoticed. Tevin Coleman of the 49ers. Now, of course, this is not he's not a huge name. He hasn't put up huge numbers. He's had some solid fantasy football games, though, I will say that. But Matt Breida is gone. He's out of San Francisco. He's in Miami now. And there's not really much competition, in that running back room. I think, people are big on Raheem Mostert, being the starter. And, while I don't like unpredictability, I think honestly at this point, there is still some unpredictability in that backfield. And I think, Tevin Coleman could be seeing a lot of snaps. There were several games last season where he saw double-digit snaps, and there were games where he shined. For instance, in the playoffs, he had I think it was against the Minnesota Vikings offhand. He had over 100 yards, over 20 carries. So Tevin Coleman is a guy I'm definitely keeping my eye on. Now, he ranked as, fantasy football's 39th running back. But he was one of 3 running backs who were, frequently used in rotation. His biggest game last year, I will add, of course, it's only one game, not a trustworthy sample size. But against Carolina, he had 3 touchdowns on the ground, 1 receiving, 37.8 points. With a lot more touches next season, with Breida gone and, Jeff Wilson Jr. is not really used that often, I think, Tevin Coleman in that super run-heavy offense of the San Francisco 49ers is definitely going to see a lot of touches. And remember, he's also used in the receiving game for my PPR guys. If you're playing PPR, that's a huge bonus. Also, I think this is a very, very good handcuff. Raheem Mostert, not a powerful guy. A guy, running backs get injured a ton. And so, you have to keep your eye on him. I think Tevin Coleman is very, very interesting here. And I know a lot of people might be thinking about Jerick McKinnon. This team hasn't even played with Jerick McKinnon, really. I don't even know if they believe that they need him. I just don't see him coming off of 2 years straight of being injured and taking a role from anyone's hands. So unless Jerick McKinnon, comes out and he's absolute animal, I like Tevin Coleman as a backup to Raheem Mostert here, and I think it's more of a 1A, 1B kind of thing, like a 1-2 punch. It's not necessarily, Tevin Coleman just comes in for the, passing downs or third down, things like that. So keep your eyes on Tevin Coleman, run heavy offense, super, super interesting. But, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. Sorry, guys. Okay. The next running back I want to talk about here, is actually, one who I've, I haven't really been super high on him, but, I'm going to, acknowledge the fact that I guess, this player has potential and could be a sneak pick. Boston Scott of the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, of course, there's not really a sample size on Boston Scott. He did have that huge game, towards the end of the season last season. I think it was against the Giants, I want to say. He exploded for like 30 plus points, and, couple games before that against the Giants as well. I'm pretty sure it was both times against the Giants, which is very weird. He just exploded for huge games. Didn't really do much else other than that for the rest of the season. He didn't really have many opportunities, didn't play in a bunch of games. But now that Miles Sanders is a starter, he's automatically the number 2. And I think what's the biggest point of interest here for Boston Scott is that weeks 14 through 17, when he was going off, he had 23 receptions, right? So in 3 weeks, he had 23 points just off of his catches. And I think that's a very, very interesting tell as to how they're going to use him next season. He's going to be a very useful backup to Miles Sanders. Even if he's not, getting a ton of, carries on the ground. If we look at his last 3 games, 4 receptions for 84, 6 receptions. Now, he only had 7 yards, which is horrible. But that's sort of fluky, right? You know how hard it is to only get 7 yards on 6 carries, on 6 catches? It's almost like you have to try, right? And then against Washington, he has 7 receptions for 39 yards, which is 10.9 points just off of the receiving. Game before that, 6 receptions, 69. So that's 12.9 points just off of receiving for a backup guy. And I think, the Eagles are sort of finding, they were just testing out the waves, testing out the water with their running back crew. And I think, now that it's more established, he could have a much bigger role. If Miles Sanders gets hurt, of course, God forbid, we don't wish injury upon anyone. Boston Scott is a good handcuff. If, Philly's been known to do the 1-2 punch kind of thing. So if they're doing that 1-2 punch combo kind of thing, Boston Scott definitely going to be worth value. I think he's going very late in drafts. He's going as basically an irrelevant pick. RB 44, pick 148. That's fine. He's going ahead of someone like Boston Scott. Boston Scott. He's going ahead of someone like J.K. Dobbins in drafts. And I think J.K. Dobbins has a ton of potential. Someone you should look out for as well. Of course, J.K. Dobbins is a huge risk. I've talked about this plenty. That's why I didn't bring up J.K. Dobbins again. With, Mark Ingram still there, Gus Edwards, Lamar Jackson. He needs time to establish himself. More of a J.K. Dobbins to me feels more of like a second half breakout kind of running back. But, Boston Scott's being valued right now above guys like that. But below several people he should probably be valued over, like Latavius Murray, like Damian Williams. I think, honestly, Boston Scott has more potential than Damian Williams. And Damian Williams is in the Kansas City offense, but I think Philly is going to use Boston Scott more than people know. He's definitely super unnoticed, and I think he's going to certainly outperform his ADP right now. So keep an eye on Boston Scott. All right, and I want to squeeze one more running back in right before we get to the end of this year, and that running back is A.J. Dillon. Now, the reason why I want to talk about A.J. Dillon, and of course, there's no stats on him here, is because I think there has to be a reason Green Bay drafted this kid, right? They have Aaron Jones, and they have Jamal Williams, but Aaron Jones has missed 4 games in 2 out of his 3 seasons. He has some health concerns. And I think, Green Bay has they had this weird formula right now. Of course, we thought their draft was going to go one way and it completely went the other way. And I think, they want to be run heavy. And they want a guy who they can count on and rely on. And I think A.J. Dillon is going to be a very, very interesting pickup for people in this draft. And I say that because, like I said, Aaron Jones has struggled with injuries. And so, if Aaron Jones gets hurt again, I think A.J. Dillon seizes the opportunity, becomes a starter in Green Bay, and surprises a lot of people. Now, of course, this is one that, this is a sort of gamble pick. Nobody's really picking him in fantasy football drafts. He's not projected much. But I think he's one who could be very, very interesting. Now, only problem is he doesn't have many receptions. He didn't have many receptions in college. He wasn't, the biggest receiving threat, but I think he's more of that sort of red zone kind of guy. Steal touchdowns, become a red zone threat, always on the goal line. Sort of like LeGarrette Blount, how he just gets a ton of touchdowns. He wasn't a receiving guy. Didn't put up huge, Jurassic numbers on the ground, but he could just get a ton of touchdowns. I think he had a season with like 18 touchdowns when he was on the Patriots. So I think A.J. Dillon could sort of have that kind of role. And Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones are entering contract years, so this could be the guy that they want to look forward to have as their franchise guy of the future. Maybe they don't want to pay the other two, or don't think that they're necessarily worth the extensions that they're going to seek with the current running back market. So keep your eyes on A.J. Dillon. Of course, that is a gamble. He's being picked super, super, super late in drafts. Running back 57 with the 169th pick, basically the last pick in the draft. So it's not like you're going to have to wait and, hope that he's still on the boards. He's going to be on boards. It's just a matter of, you're playing with a Green Bay fan or someone who's just also trying to get a sneaky pick. All right, but with that, guys, let's go into our break. And right after that, we're in our last segment for the show today, guys. So stick around. Enjoy the break.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
guys, welcome to the final segment of today's show for you guys. And now we stray away from fantasy football yet again to talk about the current events and how they correlate to the NFL. Now, in today's final segment, I want to actually talk about the NFL's biggest owner, the owner of the most valuable sports franchise in the world, Jerry Jones. Now, the reason why I want to talk about Jerry Jones is because Jerry Jones is not talking. Jerry Jones, after every game, talks to the media. He talks to the press. He wants to give his opinion about what happened, wants to give some headline for everyone to write about in their articles, wants to be, the face. He's talking before any players. He wants to be the face of his franchise. He wants to be the face in the news. Now that this terrible thing has happened, riots, protests are going on across the globe. So many, corporations, companies, sports have, shown their solidarity, have made changes. We recently saw NASCAR ban the Confederate flag at their events. And the NASCAR is one of these sports that has been, had the reputation of being unfriendly to African Americans. But that's besides the point. Jerry Jones has said nothing regarding the issue. Other teams have spoken up. Other teams have donated. Other teams have made their positions clear. Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys have been silent, and that silence speaks louder than these other teams who show that they stand in solidarity. Jerry Jones is, like I said, the biggest owner in football. He's the owner of the biggest sports franchise on the planet, and it's honestly just super, super disappointing, and, I wish I could say that I was surprised, right? I can't say that I'm surprised. This is a powerful white Southern man, very, 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 very wealthy, and, in a time where we need someone like him, to talk the most, of course he is silent. And it's just very disappointing. And I wanted to get my thoughts on it. So that, of course, that's why I'm talking about it now. Now, what bothers me the most is that, Jerry Jones, he says that, his Cowboys players to him are like family. Right, that's the culture of Cowboy Nation. Once you're a Cowboy for life. It seems like sort of like cultish. Nah, I'm just kidding. They're very familiar, and Jerry Jones doesn't shy away from that. He sort of accepts that, and now, it seems that he's ignoring the fact that members of his family are treated unequally. Every day of their lives, or unequally, every day of their lives. And many of the players that are on his team now, that have been on his team, that have helped him get the glory that he has now, feel like they aren't a part of this country. They feel like they're not, one as a nation. They feel scared when cops pull them over. They are treated unfairly and unequally because of the color of their skin. And Jerry Jones seems, to not care because he hasn't said anything. And I understand, of course, we can say you don't have to talk, you don't have to say something, but at least do something. You don't have to just show us for the cameras just to do it. But also on the same token, it feels like someone of that magnitude, with that much money, with that much pull, with that much press attention, a guy who goes on the radio every week to talk about the NFL and his Cowboys, right, as an owner. No owner does the things that this guy does. For him to not talk, it's very disappointing. We've seen other owners, even Robert Kraft, among others. We've seen them pledge money to organizations to work towards equality and racial justice. And it's just like, where's Jerry Jones when we need him to talk? And I know I keep saying the same things, but it's honestly just sort of shocking and very disappointing. You know, so many African American players on this team, players whose skin tones are darker colors. You know, players who are affected by these injustices, based on the color of skin, play for him. They play for his team. And I would just wonder what this is going to do, to their relationship, to their morale. To know that they're playing for a team with an owner who cared, who could have cared less to speak up on this thing. And it honestly feels like too late now. It feels like now if Jerry Jones does say something, we're just going to take it as he's doing damage control. It's not that he actually wants to, right? So this is part of the problem, and that's what I want you guys to take away from this too. It's not just about the injustices that occur. It's about the response to those things. And the people in power, the people who have, a lot of power and the ability to change things, not doing that. That's what is upsetting and honestly more part of the problem. And it just sucks. It is sad because, as a person who, and I think when Greg Popovich talked about this, he spoke on it very well, and I honestly liked his take that when he said, he explained that, he as a white man coaching black players, he feels that understanding their background is basically part of his job. He actually said, hold on, I want to read this actually. He said, it would bring you to tears, Popovich said, of the emotion in recent calls among Spurs players and staff. It's even deeper than you thought. And that's what really made me start to think. You're a privileged son of a bleep. And you still don't get it as much as you think you do. You got to work harder. You got to be more aware. You got to be pushed and embarrassed. You got to call it out. I'll keep reading this article here. It's on the Washington Post. They mention that stance is partly why Popovich turned his attention to Jones and Kraft, 2 of 7 NFL owners who donated at least $1 million to Trump's inaugural committee while simultaneously running franchises that rely on mostly black players. That combination doesn't mesh well with Popovich. He said, it's just hypocritical. It's incongruent. It doesn't make sense. People are blind. Do you go to your staff and your players and talk about injustices and democracy and how to protest? I don't get it. I think they put themselves in a position that's untenable. Very strong words. Very accurate words. They've done nothing to show their players that they stand with them. And while, I mentioned that Robert Kraft did donate, to help the situation. It is hypocritical to support a president who clearly does not support what's going on, clearly doesn't care to voice his support for, equality for all, and would rather push, stay ignorant and ignorance is bliss, kind of live in that sort of state. So it does stink, to see this. And like I said, it's very disappointing, but at the end of the day, I can't say I'm surprised. And that's what I'll leave you guys with today. I want to thank you for listening to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. I want to ask that you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We really appreciate it. Any comments you guys have, please post them. Let us know what you love. Let us know what you hate. Of course, keep it constructive because that helps us. And of course, just take, whatever about the situation, take it how you will. But it is one that is truly disappointing. Other than that, guys, I want to thank you for listening to the show. And of course, I am sorry that, we ended on a more dreary note. But I hope you guys enjoyed the show today. Like I said last week, I'll keep saying it. These are important things that need to be spoken about. And part of the issues and injustices are when people don't speak about them, right? So just because this is a fantasy football show doesn't mean we're going to ignore what's going on outside and around the world, because this affects all of us and it's about all of us. So there are more important things than fantasy football. I know it's very hard to believe, but there are. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you here next time. Thank you very much, guys. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay sane, and I hope you guys still have toilet paper.
I know it's been a while, but yeah. Good night, guys.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.